On this episode of the Bronze Metalist podcast, we talk about The Valley by Whitechapel. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Bronze Metalist podcast. I'm Kale.
I'm OJ.
We're two professional broadcasters. We like metal and we like to talk about it. And today we are talking about The Valley by Whitechapel.
You been drinking there, buddy? All right.
No. I just decided to be silly.
All right. That's cool.
Can't I be silly? What? I'm not allowed to be silly anymore? Yeah. Whitechapel is an American deathcore band. We'll be talking about later on. First, though, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I've been going through the through the physical therapy.
Why is that your physical therapy?
That's my physical therapy voice. And it's cool. I mean, this my the dude
that should be your speech therapy voice.
He's really been kicking my ass. And I mean, the more I go there, the more he's like, well, you can do this then. You can maybe do this.
I feel like he shouldn't be kicking your ass. That's where some of the pain is, isn't it?
It's above there. It's in my back. He's really putting me through the rigors there, and he's this past time he's messing with me.
What do you mean he's messing with you?
Well, I mean, he's okay. I want you to do 10 reps, go in this direction, because he's trying to get me to strengthen my core as well.
Okay.
And then, my six pack that I have here.
A 6-pack of bubble gum.
Well, no, it's a party ball. I'm gonna
party ball.
Yeah, I'll get the 6-pack if I keep working on it. Anyway,
okay.
And so he's telling me do these things right here. Okay, that'll help that, and give me 10 of those, and then work the other side. And we got to talking about stuff, chit chatting, and then I don't know how many in, and I said, do you know how many I've done so far? He says, do 2 more. I said, oh, so no then. I mean, you don't know how many I've done.
Seems like a good enough guess.
Sure.
If you lost track, it's probably more than 5.
Right.
I feel like you could reasonably expect someone to be able to count up to 5 before losing track. And kind of splitting the difference. Like, 2 more.
2 more. Sure.
Why not?
Why not?
Seems reasonable.
Yeah. And then he's saying things like, I'm going to go mountain climbing in Wyoming. Going to go up the Tetons there. You want to go with? Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. I'll keep you posted.
See. When is he going to do that?
I feel this summer.
Okay. This summer. I was going to right now. I feel like is a bad idea to go into the mountains.
Yeah.
Because there's still a lot of snow.
Oh, sure.
Getting warmer. So that this is the time of year when like avalanches and shit can happen.
Well, he's talking about with the Grand Tetons. It's a facial climb. You're going vertical.
Okay. It's like, what does that mean?
You're using your face. You don't use your hands and feet at all.
You just use your. They call it's like you get a chin hold.
Right, chin hold.
And you use your neck muscles to pull yourself up.
Right, and you're like, it's the old phrase. I'm gonna bite that mountain. That's right. Yeah.
When they're like, you put your nose up against it, to really see how steep it is, and then you use your gnome. Your words are hard. I was gonna say you use your gnome.
You use your gnome.
You carry a little gnome with
exactly, and he climbs you up the mountain.
Yeah, he is like there's a rope attached to the gnome, and he just hauls you up. He's a very, very strong gnome. It's the Travelocity gnome,
right?
Is what it is.
And you're traveling
the roaming gnome.
Traveling with the Roman gnome.
We all remember the roaming gnome. Those charming commercials. I almost said videos, and that's not incorrect.
It's not.
The commercials.
Those sales videos.
Those sales, the sales videos,
right? From
back in the Super Bowl sales videos,
right? That they put between the footballing,
the football. I recently started
No, you didn't.
Completely lost my train of thought. Started thinking about something completely different. No, it's because I think it's because I realized that there was absolutely zero segue into what I was about to say. So I was like, think of something really quick, and absolutely nothing occurred to me.
Now that you've recently started, and then you realized I've done nothing with my life.
Yeah. Nothing happened at all. I mean, it's vaguely interesting. Something. It's like something. It's more so something that I want to tell people about because
cool.
I think it's neat, and I think more people should be exposed to it.
Okay.
Which is the work of comedian Joe Pera.
Sure.
I came across a video of this like video essayist and animator on YouTube talking about Joe Pera's Adult Swim show, which ran for 3 seasons, and describing it as the least Adult Swim show that's ever been made.
Sure.
Because that channel has kind of become associated with the type of a very specific brand of like ironic comedy and bizarre, surreal stuff that's all, so incredibly high energy and just fucking weird. Like whether it's Tim and Eric or it's like the Eric Andre show or Rick and Morty or Metalocalypse. And these are all shows that I at one point or another have been very fond of. But there is definitely like a tendency for a lot of those shows to really lean into like very kind of cynical sort of humor now and then, especially in the last few years with the newer shows that have come out. Less so like, less so with like Eric Andre show but more so with like the Rick and Morty kind of blend of shows. Sure. Very sort of cynical, ironic humor. Joe Pera's work is completely the opposite, where everything is very slow, deliberate, earnest, and just like very comforting and warm. It's very funny, but it is so incredibly dry, where it's almost like the funniest thing is like a joke will be told and you laugh, not necessarily because the joke is super funny, but because of just how quaint it feels.
So this is like the opposite of his character in Goodfellas. I mean,
yes. Yeah. Joe Pera in Goodfellas. Right. No, he is this. So Joe Pera is a 30-something comedian from Buffalo, New York, who there's probably a video of him somewhere behaving more like a regular person, but everything I've ever seen of him, whether he's in character as his character on his show or just in character as himself, in quotes, he has the body of a tall, lanky 35-year-old man.
Under his bed.
Yes. The physical mannerisms of an awkward 13-year-old boy, and the voice and sort of interests and dialogue of an 85-year-old man. Sure. And it's this very bizarre and charming blend of characteristics that just makes for this very intensely comforting presence. And so he had this show called Joe Pera Talks With You, where he is a fictional version of himself that is a middle school choir teacher in Marquette, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And every episode just begins with him introducing some sort of a topic that he is interested in and just kind of seeing where the discussion takes him and chatting with his various friends and neighbors and family members and coworkers and whatnot. And he has done this like character for quite some time. He had a show that's on like MTV's YouTube channel that's called Pancake Breakfast Critic, where he goes to various charitable pancake breakfasts and reviews the pancake breakfast.
That's great.
He has one that's Joe Pera helps you pick out a perfect Christmas tree. There's one that got animated, which was Joe Pera Talks You to Sleep, and that was sort of his introduction to like Adult Swim. Was he had recorded this thing And then someone like sent it off towards Adult Swim, and they're like, "This is funny. We're going to animate this and put it on at like 3 a.m.
on Cartoon Network, right?"
And it just kind of went from there. His show got canceled over last summer, so there's only 3 seasons of it. But he now has a podcast that he does every month. That is basically just the show, but a podcast. Although he's not playing the choir teacher character, he's, he's that version of himself where the only thing that's removed from it is the choir teacher upper peninsula of Michigan.
The backstory.
Yeah. But he again talks about some sort of subject, and it's specifically the podcast is called Drifting Off with Joe Pera. And it's supposed to be, something you can fall asleep to. In the most recent episode, he was talking about video games and specifically Red Dead Redemption 2. So he had Roger Clark on the podcast, who was who portrayed Arthur Morgan. But he's just like, it is, I think, and I've seen many comments on his content talking about how like my generation and Gen Z as well, our sense of humor has become so completely consumed by irony and post-irony and cynicism and negativity. It's become so deeply enveloped in all of those that there's a lot of people of my generation that see like kind of wholesome content like this and are like, oh, thank God. It's like I'm drinking water, and I have, I've been parched I haven't drank water for a week, and suddenly someone hands me a nice ice cold glass, and it's like, oh, this is like a warm blanket. So
you would be are you old Gen Z or are you young millennial?
It depends on what clickbait article you click on when you search for what's the difference between Gen Z and millennial. I am either a very young millennial or a very old Gen Zer.
Sure.
I personally don't give a shit.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
But it's like a lot of people who are around my age are just like, this is the sort of thing I didn't know I deeply desired. Thank you for making this. And yeah, he just seems like a immensely charming but bizarre kind of figure. So I would recommend, if you just search Joe Pera on YouTube.
Got it.
Pera. Okay. There's just a lot of nice little videos and clips from his show. Right. There's one whole episode that you can watch for free on YouTube, and it's just it's just nice.
It is nice.
So I thought I'd give that a shout out.
That's awesome. I mean, you would think the lead guitar player for Aerosmith wouldn't necessarily have this, alternate character.
Or the same with, and it's weird because I didn't realize it's actually the same guy who is the lead vocalist for Journey.
Yeah.
I didn't know these were all the same person.
They are.
It's crazy that he was able to do all those things.
All those things and be a linebacker for the Chicago Bears in the mid-1980s.
Yeah.
You don't even know what the hell I'm talking about with that, do you?
I think I know.
Yeah.
I like it's fuzzy in my head, the actual name, but I think I know who you're talking about.
William Perry.
Okay.
The refrigerator.
Yes. I knew it was like the refrigerator.
Yeah.
It was. I had two guesses. It was either Mean Joe or the refrigerator. It was one of the two. Because
gotcha.
Mean Joe because Joe.
Right.
And then I couldn't remember the Perry part, but the refrigerator came to mind.
Right.
Yeah. I'm still playing God of War Ragnarok.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Now, is Kratos still alive in where you're playing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why?
Nothing.
You're silly.
Yeah.
Something that I thought was kind of funny that I mentioned to you earlier today is in the like mild spoilers, But when you're playing as Kratos, you go to visit the Norns, who are the fates of Norse mythology.
Right.
And you have a chat with them. And before you actually get to them, they're taunting the people in your party with all of their failures and mistakes and their personal flaws.
Right.
And
they're assholes.
They are incredibly mean, but none of what they say to you is wrong.
Right.
But like they're objectively correct. They're just being shitty about it. But when they're talking about Mimir, they go through all his different names. And it was mentioned in the 2018 game, but it's brought up again that Mimir is from the Celtic world. And one of his names is Robin of the Goodfellows, a.k.a. Puck, from Midsummer Night's Dream, which I thought it was kind of funny, a weird coincidence between God of War and the manga Berserk, where you have two very imposing rage-filled badasses as these main character who have plucky comic relief that they carry around on their hip, and they're both named Puck. Although Mimir is presumably a satyr. He mentions hooves at a certain point, and he's got little horns.
I'm trying to remember how he will, because they meet him he's bound to a tree.
You can only see his torso. You can't see his legs when he's in the tree.
Right.
But he's probably a satyr of some kind. Puck is a teeny tiny little elf. He's basically a pixie, but they're referred to as elves in Berserk. And I just thought it would be funny if the two of them swapped places. And how incredibly annoyed Kratos would be instantaneously because Puck is a lot and it's a miracle.
And not helpful.
He is helpful in the sense that he has prevented Guts from bleeding out over and over and over and over again. But he's I think he's funny, but in the actual context of the story, it would be extremely annoying. And the only reason Guts kept him around for a very long time was because he needed the medical assistance.
Sure.
And also, I think subconsciously Guts realized he needed someone around to call him out on his borderline psychopathic bullshit. The early chapters of Berserk, it's like, okay, dude, like chill with the edgy stuff. And the like Puck as a character existed entirely so that the author could let you know that like, we know he's being a lot. Like he's not getting away with this. Characters are going to call him out on his bullshit.
Yeah.
Like
stick around.
Like you don't. I don't like those kinds of stories that have like super edgy, borderline like psychopathic main characters where no one calls them out on their bullshit, and the story tries to assert that they're that this person's right and their worldview is correct. It's like, no, people constantly call Guts out for being an incredible asshole,
being a monster.
Like the only reason he's not a straight up villain is because the things he fights are genuinely worse than he is. They're literal monsters that committed some act of human sacrifice to become a demon. But Guts is barely better than any of them for the first few parts of the story before he shapes the fuck up. But if he swapped places with Mimir, that would just.
Now,
I'm just imagining Kratos just being like, "You are too small to be an elf."
Well, here's my question though. In this little fantasy, is it are we switching Puck into the God of War story, or are we switching
both?
Kratos
swapping
into the
Kratos swapping into Berserk would be. I don't think he would have much trouble, honestly.
Okay,
because Berserk Berserk is like a very dark fantasy setting. There's not like gods per se.
Sure.
There's like very powerful demons that normal humans can't possibly hope to like win against unless they have like a cannon or something. But Kratos is a literal god, so he would probably be fine. I think things in the God of War universe are orders of magnitude more powerful, and Kratos still manages to kill all of them, including other gods.
Right, the entire Greek pantheon.
Yeah, with pretty startling regularity. So
Yeah.
I feel like Kratos would be fine. Guts would be screwed, probably.
Sure.
He's very strong, has pretty cool cursed armor, and a very big sword, and that's about it. He does have a cannon in his arm. But other than that, he's just a guy.
His boomstick.
Yeah, he has a metal prosthetic hand, and the hand flips down, and there's a cannon in there, which is pretty neat.
That is neat.
Yeah, I think he would be pretty well screwed if he got put into the God of War universe. Although, depending upon what point in the story you're looking at, the God of War universe is some orders of magnitude less hostile than the universe that Guts inhabits. At least it would be to Guts himself.
Sure.
Because he has like a cursed brand that constantly draws like ghosts and demons towards him. Every night when the sun goes down, he gets attacked by like evil spirits. Bad shit is drawn to him constantly against his will. So if he's goes and lives in a universe where those rules don't apply anymore, he'd probably be pretty happy.
Yeah, and then Kratos wouldn't have a problem because he doesn't have that particular curse.
Yep.
So the monsters wouldn't be drawn to him. So they would go.
That one I know is you're making shit up.
What?
You're making things up.
What am I making up?
You're making things up again, Arnold. From Book of Mormon. There's a song from the Book of Mormon. You've never seen the Book of Mormon?
I haven't seen it yet. No.
Or even like listened to it at all?
No, I have not.
It's like one of two musicals I've ever gone to.
Really?
At least like a big Broadway musical. I went and saw it in Minneapolis one time. It was very good. It was very funny.
Well, yeah.
It's a damn fine show. I think I saw it when I think it was before Josh Gad blew up, and I think he played the role of Elder Cunningham.
Really?
At the time, I think it was Josh Gad. I might be misremembering that, or it was someone who looked quite a lot like Josh Gad, a shorter, black-haired fellow.
Sure.
I do not recall. I do not recall. Back then, when I was Ronald Reagan.
Right.
You want to talk about Whitechapel?
All right.
So Whitechapel is an American deathcore band from Knoxville, Tennessee. They have been making music since the mid-2000s and have sort of transitioned over the last probably like 7 years or so from a pretty straightforward deathcore type sound to including a lot more elements of progressive metal and groove metal. Every once in a while, I think you can really hear some like new metal influences peeking in every once in a while. But they've really sort of been developing their sounds for like the last three albums. And this is the middle point of those last three. And this is also the first album that vocalist Phil Bozeman decided to make a concept album drawing inspiration from his quite troubled childhood. And the separate deaths of his parents when he was a kid. His dad passed away suddenly when he was 10. And then a number of years later, his mom passed away of a drug overdose after she had remarried this apparently very abusive man. I think his mother also suffered from schizophrenia. And her new husband was apparently a massive piece of shit who Phil in interviews has blamed for hooking her on drugs and that sort of thing.
And did he also die?
More recently, I can't remember. I read an interview last time when we talked to, or when we talked about Ken last year, which is the album that came out after this.
Right.
I think it had been more recently that his stepdad had passed away.
I feel like his stepdad passed away somewhere around the time he was writing the lyrics
for this album. Yeah, I think that is the case. I should have looked up that interview again, but this album basically, I mean, it does that metal thing of usually when you're writing music that is this intense, you're going to be using a lot of metaphor, and it's going to be a lot of heightened. You're creating a fantasy that is based on things. I mean, that's think of like Emperor of Sand by Mastodon. Mm-hmm. It's an album about cancer. Nobody specifically says anything about cancer.
No, but
during the album, it's you're using your real life as inspiration for essentially like a fantasy sort of story. This is a very dark fantasy sort of story.
Is it fantasy though? I mean,
not really. Like there are, I highly doubt that Phil actually went to his stepfather's grave and pissed on it. Maybe he did. I wouldn't blame him for it,
right?
Based on the things that he said. But,
and spit.
But yeah, the first song, which is called "When a Demon Defiles a Witch," is apparently based on a hallucination that his mother had and wrote down in a journal of hers. Mm-hmm. But drawing a lot of inspiration from a very troubled upbringing. When his mother died, he was taken in by his grandmother, who he still lives across the street from. At least as of the interview that I read a year and a half ago, or however long ago it was. But so this album is, I think there was I think a lot of critics seemed to like this one better than Kin. Mm-hmm. It contains kind of a bit more of a balance between the sort of instrumentality. I think the rhythm section maybe suffers a little bit on Kin compared to this album. This album has some big chunky riffs.
Right.
Whereas Kin, I think, leaned a lot more on the lead guitar and the
horn section,
and the horn section as well. Yeah. But I think Kin leaned a lot more heavily into the melodic portion of their sound,
which is on this.
There's definitely plenty of great leads on this, and the vocals and the lyrics are still amazing. Mm-hmm. But the riffs, I think, on a couple songs in particular, just hit really, really hard in a way that I don't think anything on Kin quite does. Mm-hmm. This is a heavier album, I think. And Phil's vocal style kind of changed between albums a little bit. Mm-hmm. Kin contains a lot more of like sort of mid-range vocals that are a little bit raspier almost. Right. This contains a lot more of what he's been known for since they started out as a band, which is incredibly deep guttural vocals that are still most of the time very comprehensible.
Right. Very. You can definitely tell what he's saying.
Yeah, he has a remarkable talent for that of not only being able to get such low lows and such intensity out of his voice, but also to be able to make it decipherable,
discernible. Yeah, you can definitely.
Which is not something a lot of vocalists are able to pull off. A lot of vocalists, you kind of get one or the other. You can maybe do it in the studio, but it's harder to do it live.
And he does it live.
And yes, is any videos I've ever seen, he's able to pull it off. And he sings clean as well.
Yeah. In fact, okay, I'm listening to this. I listened to this. I think I listened to part of it yesterday, and then I listened to it all again as a whole today. Yeah. I bought a bookcase. Mm-hmm. For all the books that my ex-wife left at my house.
Yes.
And so
they were your books.
They were my books. Well, actually, some of them were hers. And I could tell it was like, well, she just doesn't want this anymore. So I was putting the books on the shelf while listening to this album. I'm like, oh, wow, this is a shorter album than I realized it was going to be, because all of a sudden, for some reason, I'm listening to Tool.
Yeah, he does. His clean singing does sound a little bit like Maynard.
Yeah.
For sure. I think some other things that came up to me was a little bit of Corey Taylor to his cleans. I think that's just because they both have very deep voices. Mm-hmm. I think they're both kind of in the same vocal range.
Right.
But so that's, I think, just my reference voice and my reference. That wasn't a wrong sentence to say. Yeah, it's the voice that I reference when thinking of metal vocalists with deeper singing voice, at least American ones anyway, because if we go foreign, then you have Michael Ackerfeld, but he's got that Swedish accent. He sings clean, and this album contained their first, I guess Hickory Creek does contain a little bit of screams on it. Towards the end, there is an acoustic version of Hickory Creek that I adore, that I've listened to probably way more than anything else on this album, and the regular version of Hickory Creek as well. I've listened to a ton, but like the acoustic version is entirely, clean sung. Sure. Really kind of showing off how far Phil has come. I remember the first album that they put out that had any clean singing on it whatsoever, that came out in like 2015 or 16. The deathcore community had not yet accepted that this is okay. Like, this is good. This is not going to ruin the genre. It's funny looking at like the deathcore community in like 2010 to 2015 compared to where it seems to be at now, where people were like had such massive like violent reactions to any band announcing that they were going to include some clean singing or any amount of like melody into their music. It's like, we don't want that. That's why we listen to this genre, because we don't have that shit. And it's like, I feel like the community has kind of just grown up and probably been exposed to other kinds of music and other kinds of metal. I think there are a lot of people that were kind of my age that, started listening to deathcore, and that was maybe like one of the only genres they really listened to for a while before they kind of were like, oh, hey, let's check out some other stuff. And I actually like this, and I wouldn't mind hearing what this would sound like if we combined that with what I came up enjoying.
If we could just combine deathcore and K-pop.
I mean, it's a Japanese band, but that's kind of baby metal.
It is kind of baby metal. By the way, my neighbor flew to Japan to watch them, to watch them a couple of times.
Wow. I feel like, I mean, they've gone on tours probably. I guess it gives you an excuse to go on vacation to Japan.
Well, which is what he was really doing.
So does this album slap?
No,
not at all.
Yeah,
doesn't slap.
It slaps. In a lot of the, reminded me a little bit of like the Mick Gordon sound. Yeah. I
think, I'm not sure. I know they've definitely used 8-string guitars. I don't know if they've ever used 9 strings. There's probably some deathcore band out there that uses 9-string guitar. I think Whitechapel has kept it to 8. I think 9 just gets kind of excessive, where if you're not doing something that is as heavily produced as like the Doom soundtracks are, you're not gonna, that extra low range that you get is just gonna sound like mush, unless you really take your time with it. I remember hearing people talk about like that's kind of the problem with 9-string guitars, is that it's you don't get enough out of that extra low. And then you go any further than that, and you're basically just strapping a bass guitar up onto the top end.
Right.
Like Jared Dines' ridiculous 14-string guitar or 21-string. I can't remember what the biggest one he has is.
Oh, there's something that's like 60 some odd strings.
Or if he even has it anymore, because I think he might have sold it at some point. They're just ridiculous. They're cool as hell to look at, but they're just completely ridiculous.
It's a novelty.
It's absolutely a novelty. But there's definitely some riffage that feels like that.
I felt like I was playing Doom for a little bit there.
I mean, the last song is called Doom Woods.
Yeah,
which is probably one of the songs that would fit the least on a Doom soundtrack. Right. But some of the other ones definitely have that very heavy kind of, not gent, but gentish sort of riffs. There was a couple albums previous to this that leaned a little bit more heavily in this sort of gent direction, but I think they found a very nice mix. It's something about like these last 2 albums feel more there's something about it that feels more American, like feels like I think it's the occasional inclusion of some acoustic guitar.
Right.
There's just something about that feels more Tennessee. Like you can see some of that coming through, and it probably in combination with knowing about the lyrics and what the inspiration for them is for. Just it feels grounded. Something about their sound feels grounded.
Sure.
That I enjoy. So out of 5 reviews, this came out to 87%,
which very
on
good.
a 100% scale, which is pretty damn good. What's your favorite song on the album?
Well, I thought about that, and I really love the song Brimstone, because that's a very don't fuck with me song, and the music itself is
Yes.
great at the same time. I liked We Are One. Just a different song stands out,
Yes.
but as we discussed, Forgiveness is Weakness.
Yeah.
It's fucking crazy.
The absolute, like, we've both listened to a lot of extreme metal in our lives.
Yeah.
For me, that is one of the angriest songs I have ever heard.
Because it feels real. Like he's not telling a story. He's saying
none of that emotion there is fake.
Yeah,
that is all directed at a real person who existed.
Right.
And yeah, it's all of that comes through.
Yeah, a real person that existed from the person who feels that way about that person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And is seemingly quite justified in feeling the way that he feels. Yeah, it's a very, very, very just so intense, intense. I chose Third Depth as my favorite.
Oh, sure.
My favorite track includes some of a lot of the clean singing.
That's the song that I thought was where Tool had come in.
Yeah. There is definitely a pretty heavy, like, progressive metal influence on that song.
That's a great song.
That song, and there's like the chorus maybe. I don't know necessarily the songwriting portion, but the song Lovelace at points sounds like it could be a fucking Gojira song. Like there's a part where Phil screams "Help me," and that sort of semi-melodic voice that you hear on that you hear Joe do all the time on Gojira tracks, and they're like the riff going on in the background. It sounds like something you would hear like straight out of a Gojira track. Some honorable mentions. I have to put Hickory Creek there.
Sure.
I probably would have put it as my favorite, but it's kind of like I've listened to that one so many times. Like what is, pick something else and explore that and listen to it a couple more times. I also really love the first track. I think Demon Defiles a Witch is just amazing. And that the guitar solo in there, it's not the solo itself that I love so much. It is the riff and like the key change that happens in that guitar solo with the rhythm section. I love that section. That like it's really rare when there is a guitar solo going on to actually like the rhythm guitar more. Right. And it's not because it's a bad guitar solo. It's just that the riff that's going on in the rhythm section is there's just something about it I really, really like.
It's funny. That's always been my biggest complaint about a lot of these virtuoso, like rock and metal guitarists that put out just instrumental albums. Yeah, that's just them playing leads, over a backing track. I always find those to be so fucking boring because those are some great leads, but the music behind it is.
Could be anything.
Yeah,
you might as well just have a fucking metronome. Yeah, I definitely know what you're saying. Where a lot of those the rhythm guitar is just boring as fuck. Right. And the bass as well. It's usually unless you are. Unless it's basically a super group with some guy's name on it, where that guy has brought in a bunch of really awesome musicians to help out. Then maybe you could have you could consider Liquid Tension Experiment to be the the Mike Portnoy band, basically. But you've also got John Petrucci and Jordan Rudess and Tony Levin. Yeah. So like, no one can really say that there's not a lot of work going into the other parts of the music there.
Right. Yeah. There's not a hack in the group. They're awesome.
It's 4 absolute virtuosos just going absolutely ham. I need to re-listen to that album again.
So good.
It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah.
But and then I also wanted to give a shout out to Doomwoods as well.
Oh, sure.
I think Doomwoods is really good because it one thing that I love about it is both in the lyrics and in like the way that the song ends, it's such a perfect lead into the next album. Like everything about it sonically and lyrically, it just, you can seamlessly transition from the end of that song to the beginning of the next album.
Yeah.
And
Kin is the next album.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know if it's going to be a trilogy. In the sort of fantastical storyline version of these concepts album, it seemed like Kin was a pretty sort of definitive end to this story that seemed to be told. So I don't know if they're going to keep going with this concept for the next album or if they're going to try something different. I don't know, but I'm excited to hear about it because I love this direction that they've taken over the last number of years. Cause like I hadn't listened to a lot of Whitechapel before like Kin came out. Like I was familiar with them. I knew enough like, oh, Phil Bozeman's a great vocalist, but all their music, it's good deathcore, but there was, by the time I was like a junior in college, I was looking to listen to some different stuff. Like I had heard what I felt like everything deathcore had to offer at the time. And then Kin comes out and I'd kept up with a couple of bands, Shadow of Intent and Fit for an Autopsy and stuff. But then Kin comes out and is like, oh, Whitechapel has changed and I like it.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to hear more from them. At some point. What medal you're bestowing upon the Valley, like Maskanada to Chewbacca?
I struggle. I think I'm going to give it a gold. I think it deserves one.
I agree. I think this here's a goldie. It's a goldie. So next week, what do you want to listen to?
Here's the funny thing. I'd already decided on an album before I listened all the way through this one. And it's funny because I had decided that I was going to get you to listen to the band Tool.
Sure. All right. What Tool album are we doing?
Enema. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Or I guess it could be pronounced Enema. Because what's that letter called? That letter has a name.
The AE?
Yeah. I feel like it has a name because like Thorn, how Thorn has a name.
I think it's pronounced Arts and Entertainment.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So Enema by Tool. That's how I'm going to pronounce it.
Enema.
And then I'm going to say Tool weird. Tool. Tool.
Tool.
Tool. It's T''UL.
With umlauts.
With an umlaut over the U for sure. So yeah, that's next week. I'm excited. I've never really had a big reason to listen to Tool.
Okay, from 1996.
So yeah, we'll get to that. Until then, go ahead and follow us on Facebook or Twitter if you so desire, and you can get updates on when episodes come out there. That's your preferred way to get those. Otherwise, just subscribe to our feed on whatever it is you're using to listen to us. Thank you very much for listening to another episode of the Bronze Medalist Podcast. I'm Kale.
I'm OJ.
Congratulations.